My name's Mervyn Linford. I've been writing poetry now for nearly 50 years, a large part of which concerns itself with ornithology. I've written literally hundreds of poems about birds. I'm in the process of putting together a collection of these bird poems, some of which have already been published, along with other unpublished and new poems. I may publish a collection with my own small not-for-profit press, the Literal Press, or else I may submit the manuscript to another publisher for consideration. The following 7 poems are just a small sample of the collection that will eventually contain some 100 poems. I don't write nature poetry as a means of escape from the realities of the environmental crisis that is worsening exponentially, nor just for the sense of consolation that such writing may engender. I write nature poetry, or is it nature that writes me, in an attempt to bridge that Cartesian gap that separates humankind from the world beyond, the self, and the wider universe. I write to highlight exactly what it is that we are losing, and as a counterbalance to the financial exponents of perpetual growth and those in the agri-business who persist in denying the obvious as far as the red list is concerned. This first poem is called Twitcher, which I'm not. I'm very keen on ornithology, but I don't travel miles to watch rare species. It was a poem published in my second collection by the Bentham Press called Talking to the Bees. It was also published in PN Review in July 1993. Twitcher. I sit here listening to the birds before the migrants come, before their words are lost to other voices. It's what they tell you in the books, the way to learn, to separate. Listen, there's a wren, loud for its size. Consider the final trill, that rattle like a signature, a coda. There's a dunnock, shrill and scratchy, dapper in its own way, a touch colonial, needs a veranda, a punkawalla. Is that a robin? Yes, it must be. Nothing else as purposeful, pugnacious, but wistful too. Listen, it decants another note. The setting sun, like burgundy, like claret. The next poem is called May the 5th. Where my partner lives, the swifts return every year, almost without fail, on exactly the same day, May the 5th. This particular poem was published in my second collection, To Essex Poets by the Bentham Press. It was also published in the independent newspaper's Poem of the Day. May the 5th. The arrival of the swifts. For days I've watched nothing, and yet here they are, 5 on the evening air, curved into substance by the thought of summer. Cuneiform on blue papyrus, fluent with contrast. All night they'll fly, ink to the sky's ink, lost to the liquid of the leaching stars. Tomorrow, when the flowers wake, when the words of fragrance climb on the voices of the warming earth. They'll underline the languages they make, screech over paper like a nib that scratches. I wrote a series of poems about birds in a similar form. This is just one of them. It's called Starling. This was also in Two Essex Poets by the Brantham Press, and it's also been broadcast on BBC Radio Essex. Starling. Master of mimics out of clicks and murmurs, street curlew, phone caller, ghost at the corner of contrary skies, hawking the habit of its clone acoustics, slang shuffler, curb coster, hunching its shoulders to the inch of hustle, spiv in the market of plebeian sparrows, touting the traffic of its sway and swagger, crowd pusher, beak stabber, shifty in winter with a bib of blizzards, slick into summer with its suit a spectrum. Last year I was lucky enough to have a poem commended in the George Crabbe Poetry Competition. It's entitled Hedgey-Bet, which is the name we had for the dunnock or hedge-centre or hedge sparrow. One can take one's pick. Hedgey-Bet. Thin and scratchy, that's the sound of the dunnock. The sound, if you like, of spring. Not yet full-throated, just beginnings. It floats. If floats is the word for a song. Above the celandine, the stitchwort and the sorrel, like the ghost of former springs and other people. A sound that brings them back. Children I knew, now dead, in the woods at One Tree Hill or Westley Heights, arms full of bluebells before ecology, with ears attuned to the chiff-chaff, the yaffle and the cuckoo. Like the wind-up gramophone I found on Pitsy Tip, the box of needles, Tommy Steele, Pat Boone, the laughing policeman. Thin and scratchy as I think of all those boys, the girls I fancied. The spring, slack, unwound, unwindable, going back a virtual recording in the mind as the dunnock sings. If sings is the word for a needle in a groove, stuck, thin, repetitive, scratchy. One of my favourite spots around the Essex coast is Mersey Island, and this poem is about black-tailed godwits. It was published in my latest collection, Credo, from the Mica Press, 2017. Black-tailed godwits. Three godwits, three black-tailed godwits, standing at the tide's full edge. One on one leg, head tucked in beneath a wing, snoozes. The others, busier with worms and mollusks, and all such things secreted in the ooze beneath their feet, are almost black, silhouetted in the heat of late September, and the sunshot glittering shatter of the sea in smithereens. Bladderwrack and eelgrass seep into the senses with the smell of oyster smacks and cockle spits and brine. And early, but expected from the east, the darkening skeins of those dark-bellied geese who write their cursive script across a sky as wide as winter. This next poem is called St. Benet's Sheep. These are the geese that graze regularly alongside the river Bure in Norfolk near St. Benet's Abbey, and they've often been called St. Benet's Sheep. This poem was published in Staple magazine in 1993. St. Benet's Sheep. If you go to St. Benet's, or is it Benedict's, where the old red mill grows from the arches of the abbey's ruins, you may, as I, a stranger on this road, whose dusty way is lined with Norfolk reeds, be slow at first to hear the voice of prayer that leaves the marsh and feathers through the wind. But if you stand and stare across the Bure, where salves in supplication search the sky, and harriers hang cruciform on air, you may just once be conscious in a while of how the past in plainsong lingers there, and why the geese in gaggles crop the sward. To finish, I'll read a poem called A Lark in Summer, and that's exactly what it was when I wrote it. The intention was a lark, a bit of fun, a bit of mickey taking about the pastoral. But as the poem progressed, I realised it was deeper than that. It said something about how I feel about the pastoral music, nature poetry, and also about England and the English countryside. I've never been nationalistic or jingoistic, I'm not a flag waver. But the poetry of nature of England and the paintings, the watercolours, especially with their atmosphere, and music by people like Elgar or Butterworth or Delius is just beautiful. Anyway, A Lark in Summer. I should mention that Wisden is the name of a book to do with cricket that vicars especially love to read. A Lark in Summer. When you think of England, you think of the vicarage. You think of the vicar and his shelves of books, Wisden on one side, Donne on the other. Here, between two large towns, set square within its own green acres, Sutton with Shopland relives the dream of England and its shires. Screened from a road by an avenue of limes, this poem of a bygone age rhymes through the summer with its Georgian metric. Apple and pear, primed by the blackbird and the evening thrush, glare in the sunset like a line of music. Vaughan Williams is walking with the squire between the hoops, haphazard on the lawn, and Meredith, a moment in their minds, is borne aloft to shine on lyric wings. Thank you very much.